Behind every great political dynasty stands an even greater family machine, each member carrying a distinct role in the grand narrative. In the 20th century, the Kennedys showed us this first. Bobby's bulldog attitude and legal genius, Teddy's senatorial mastery, and Jack's charismatic leadership. Then, at the top of the 21st century, the Bushes refined it through H.W.'s diplomatic prowess and W.'s folksy charm. But the Trump resurrection of 2024 reveals a new evolution in dynastic politics, and while the raw numbers tell one story, 312 electoral votes, a 5 million popular vote margin, and battleground states falling like dominoes, the Trump family machinery behind this victory unveils something more profound. Eric Trump emerged as the quiet revolutionary, transforming campaign operations into a digital age marvel that left veteran political operators in awe. Don Jr. became the movement's torchbearer, channeling his father's fire while building his own power base among the faithful. And even 18-year-old Barron showed remarkable instinct, his hand-picked roster of podcast influencers swaying crucial young male voters in unprecedented numbers. But as each of the Trump children transition from campaign warriors to potential heirs of America's most polarizing political movement, a crucial question emerges. Will they prove themselves worthy successors to their father's revolution? Or will the weight of his legacy prove too heavy to bear? In today's episode, we'll analyze each Trump child's strengths, weaknesses, and chances of maintaining their father's movement, as we answer if the Trump children are great heirs or destined to fail. First on our list is the youngest Trump heir, and perhaps the most intriguing. Born in 2006 to the Donald and First Lady Melania Trump, Barron Trump stands tall, quite literally, at 6 feet 7 inches, as the first true digital native of the Trump dynasty. Thus, what we're looking at here is something unprecedented in American political families. A potential heir who came of age during the social media revolution, born to a celebrity-turned-president father and a fiercely protective former model mother. Then, let's consider for a moment the unique advantages Barron brings to the table. While his older siblings had their awkward teenage years splashed across New York's unforgiving tabloids, Melania Trump's ironclad protection of Barron's privacy has kept his public image pristine. Make no mistake, this is political capital in its purest form, a blank slate that most political heirs would kill for. What we should also consider is his early showing of political instinct. At just 18, Barron's influence on his father's 2024 campaign strategy has already raised eyebrows among seasoned political observers. While his siblings were still pushing traditional Fox News appearances, it was Barron who guided the campaign toward podcast appearances and internet personality engagements. The result was a significant shift in young male voter support. Not bad for someone who can't even legally drink yet. The academic piece of this puzzle is particularly fascinating. Here's a Trump heir entering NYU's Stern School of Business at a time when digital economies are reshaping the very nature of power. Unlike his siblings, who learned business in an analog world, Barron's education coincides perfectly with the rise of digital influence markets. If you're keeping score at home, that's another point in the potential column. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. For every strength in Barron's position, there's a corresponding challenge that could derail his dynastic potential. Without a doubt, if you're putting your money on Barron Trump's future, the timing question looms largest. He's coming of age at what might be the peak of the Trump political brand. History tells us that political movements rarely maintain their fever pitch across generations, and Barron's success may depend entirely on his ability to translate his father's populist appeal into something relevant for Generation Alpha, a trick that stumped many political heirs before him. Perhaps most telling is the emergence of Barron 2044 merchandise among the MAGA faithful. It speaks volumes about both the opportunity and the burden he faces. Some of the younger Trump base has already cast him as their future standard-bearer, projecting their hopes onto his carefully maintained blank canvas. But here's the million-dollar question. Will he embrace this role, or will the weight of these expectations push him toward a different path entirely? Therefore, if you're asking for odds, let's call it 60-40 against him following his father's political path. But don't be shocked if this particular Trump heir has a few surprises up his sleeve. Next up on our dynastic examination is perhaps the most fascinating outlier in the Trump lineup, Tiffany Trump, the only child from Donald Trump's marriage to Marla Maples. If you're looking for a study in how geography and circumstance can reshape dynastic destiny, look no further than the other Trump daughter. Here's what makes Tiffany's position particularly interesting. While her siblings were cutting their teeth in Manhattan real estate and reality TV, she was growing up in California with her mother, about as far from Trump Tower as you could get while staying in the continental United States. You might think this would be a disadvantage, and in many ways it was. But let's consider how this outsider status might actually be her secret weapon. What we're seeing now, particularly in the lead-up to 2024, is a remarkable pivot. While Ivanka has stepped back from the political spotlight, Tiffany has been strategically stepping forward. And here's where it gets interesting. Her November 2023 social media interventions on her father's behalf, clarifying positions on hot-button issues like abortion and IVF, showed a political touch that surprised many observers. Not bad for the so-called forgotten Trump. Let's talk credentials for a moment. Unlike her business-focused siblings, Tiffany went to law school at Georgetown. And in the world of political dynasties, this is no small thing. But here's where things get complicated. The Trump base has always been somewhat lukewarm toward Tiffany, viewing her California upbringing and relative absence from Trump organization dealings with suspicion. What we should consider, though, is whether this apparent weakness might actually be her strength. Without a doubt, if you're wagering on which Trump child might successfully pivot the family legacy in an unexpected direction, Tiffany deserves serious consideration. Her marriage to Michael Boulos, son of a Lebanese-American business magnate, adds an international dimension to her portfolio. And let's not overlook her growing comfort with addressing controversial political issues, a skill that's particularly crucial in today's polarized environment. What makes Tiffany's position uniquely powerful is her ability to play both insider and outsider cards. When she needs establishment credibility, she can point to her law degree and relatively normal upbringing. When she needs to tap into the MAGA movement, she can leverage her father's legacy. It's a flexibility that her siblings, more deeply entrenched in the Trump brand, simply don't have. Looking ahead, here's the smart money take. While Don Jr. and Eric fight to maintain their father's base, and Ivanka charts a course away from politics entirely, Tiffany might just be positioning herself as the family's stealth weapon. Her odds of emerging as a significant political force. Let's call it 50-50, better than you might expect for the once-forgotten Trump. The key question isn't whether she has the tools to succeed, but whether she can transform her outsider status from a liability into an asset. Moving up our chronological ladder brings us to Eric Trump. And if you're looking for a study in how personality might be destiny in political dynasties, you've found it. Let's start with an uncomfortable truth. In a family built on showmanship and swagger, Eric Trump's personality is decidedly normal. What we're looking at here is the unusual case of a political heir who seems almost temperamentally unsuited for the empire he's meant to help lead. While his father electrifies crowds with bombastic declarations and his brother Don Jr. plays the role of MAGA warrior, Eric speaks in the measured tones of a corporate middle manager. In the world of Trump politics, that's like bringing a spreadsheet to a prize fight. But here's where things get fascinating. The 2024 campaign revealed that being the normal Trump might actually be a superpower. While everyone was watching Don Jr.'s fiery speeches and Barron's podcast strategy, Eric was quietly building what might be the most sophisticated political operation in modern campaign history. Let's talk numbers for a moment. Under Eric and his wife Lara's management, the campaign orchestrated rallies that broke attendance records, coordinated over 200,000 poll watchers and volunteers, and developed a hybrid digital traditional ground game that rewrote the rules of political organizing. This wasn't just campaign management. It was a masterclass in modern political machinery. What we should consider is the Kennedy parallel. Not every successful political dynasty member needed to be JFK. Some, like Attorney General Robert Kennedy, found their power in being the operational bulldog, the behind-the-scenes force that made the machine run. That's exactly what we're seeing with Eric Trump. Without a doubt, if you're looking at who actually secured the 2024 victory, Eric and his wife Lara's fingerprints are everywhere. His modernization of the campaign's fundraising approach, blending aggressive digital strategies with traditional donor cultivation, created a war chest that seemed bottomless. His deployment of sophisticated data analytics for voter targeting turned traditional campaign wisdom on its head. But here's where it gets really interesting. The Eric-Lara power couple might actually be the dynasty's secret weapon. While Eric mastered the campaign's operational side, Lara Trump's elevation to RNC co-chair and her management of election integrity operations created a formidable 1-2 punch. Their election integrity initiative, with its army of poll watchers and rapid response legal teams, effectively neutralized the kinds of challenges that plagued previous Trump campaigns. Looking ahead, here's the smart money take. Eric Trump's apparent normality might be exactly what the Trump dynasty needs to institutionalize its power. While Don Jr. maintains the movement's fire and Ivanka courts the corporate world, Eric is building the infrastructure that could turn a personality-driven movement into a lasting political machine. The odds on Eric's future? Let's call it 50-50 in favor of him emerging as the dynasty's most crucial player over the next decade. Not because he'll ever match his father's charisma or his brother's popularity with the base, but because he's proven himself capable of something potentially more valuable, turning the Trump political brand into a sustainable professional operation. The ultimate irony might be this. In a family that made its name through spectacle and showmanship, it's the quiet, spreadsheet-wielding middle son who might actually be building something built to last. Next, let's turn our attention to Don Jr., and what we're looking at here is perhaps the most fascinating case study in how to simultaneously succeed and fail at inheriting a political movement. If you're keeping score at home, Don Jr. has managed to become both the most successful and most vulnerable of the Trump heirs, and that's no small feat. Here's what makes Jr.'s position particularly compelling. At 46, he's effectively become the crown prince of MAGA, cultivating a following that sometimes rivals his father's in intensity. What we're seeing is someone who didn't just inherit his father's political base, he's actively shaped it. His push to move the 2024 campaign toward more extreme positions and his role as kingmaker in Senate primaries tells us something crucial about his strategy. He's betting everything on the movement's true believers. And, as far as numbers go, when Don Jr. speaks at conservative gatherings, he pulls crowds that would make most senators jealous. His social media engagement often outperforms mainstream Republican figures, and his endorsements carry serious weight in primary races. If you're measuring raw political influence, he's arguably achieved more than any other presidential child in recent memory. But here's where things get complicated. And trust me, they get very complicated. What we should consider is whether Don Jr.'s success with the base has come at the cost of any future expansion. His embrace of controversial partnerships, his increasingly aggressive rhetoric, and his seeming inability to modulate his message for different audiences suggests someone who might have already hit his political ceiling. Without a doubt, if you're betting on which Trump child will maintain the strongest grip on the MAGA movement's core, Don Jr. is your safest bet. His strategy of building what he calls a MAGA bench, grooming the next generation of populist leaders, shows political foresight that his siblings haven't matched. His collaboration with figures like J.D. Vance demonstrates an understanding of coalition building within his ideological lane. But here's the million-dollar question. Has Don Jr. become too good at being his father's son? The qualities that make him effective with the base, the combative style, the conspiracy-tinged rhetoric, the absolute loyalty to the movement, might make it impossible for him to ever step out of his father's shadow. Unlike the Kennedy or Bush children who managed to establish their own political identities, Don Jr. seems locked into a perpetual role as his father's most faithful echo. Looking ahead, here's the cold, hard truth. Don Jr.'s political future probably isn't in elected office at all, and that's by design. The odds of him successfully running for the highest office himself at this point? Let's call it 20-80 against. But his chances of becoming the movement's chief kingmaker are more like 80-20 in favor. He's probably not trying to inherit his father's crown. He's aiming to become the one who chooses who gets to wear it next. But the ultimate irony of Don Jr.'s position might be this. In becoming the most successful curator of his father's political movement, he's found something potentially more valuable than electoral victory. He's become its gatekeeper. While others dream of being the next Trump on the ballot, Don Jr. is positioning himself to be the next Roger Stone or Karl Rove, but with an already built-in army of true believers at his command. Next on our dynastic analysis is the power couple that once seemed destined to inherit it all. Let's be clear about something right from the start. If you were placing bets in 2017 on which Trump child would carry the family legacy forward, Ivanka Trump would have been the odds-on favorite. And that's what makes her current trajectory so fascinating. Here's where things get interesting. Ivanka and Jared's carefully choreographed exit from politics tells us something crucial about both their instincts and their ambitions. While Don Jr. doubles down on MAGA and Eric maintains his balancing act, the Kushners have executed what might be the most elegant pivot in modern political history. Their move to Florida wasn't just a change of address. It was a masterclass in political distancing. What we should consider is the sheer scale of what they're walking away from. Ivanka wasn't just another Trump child. She was the closest advisor, the de facto First Lady at times, the one who could soften her father's rougher edges. Jared wasn't just a son-in-law, he was the architect of the Abraham Accords and a key player in everything from Middle East peace to criminal justice reform. That's a lot of political capital to leave on the table. But let's talk strategy for a moment. While critics see their withdrawal from politics as a retreat, what we're actually watching might be a sophisticated long-term play. Jared's $3 billion private equity fund, backed by Saudi and Emirati money, suggests someone building influence through channels that don't depend on election cycles. Meanwhile, Ivanka's careful maintenance of her personal brand, emphasizing business and family over politics, keeps her options remarkably open. Without a doubt, if you're looking for the Trump heirs, most likely to maintain their own non-Trump-related global power regardless of political wins, the Kushners are your best bet. Here's why. They've managed to translate their White House experience into tangible international relationships and business opportunities while avoiding the taint of January 6th and subsequent controversies. And that's no small feat. Thus, here's where the odds get really interesting. Chances of Ivanka returning to formal politics are, let's call it, 30 to 70 against. But probability of the Kushners wielding significant influence in global business and political circles over the next decade, that's likely 80-20 in favor. They're playing a different game entirely, one that doesn't depend on campaign rallies or ex-followers. Looking ahead, here's the hot take. Ivanka and Jared haven't abandoned power. They've just chosen to pursue it through boardrooms rather than ballot boxes. And in a world where corporate influence often outlasts political movements, that might just make them the most successful Trump heirs of all. And last, let's turn our attention to what might be the most intriguing part of the Trump dynasty story, the grandchildren. If you're looking for signs of where this political dynasty is really headed, the third generation often tells us more than the second. Thus, the Trump family's third generation presents a fascinating case study in dynasty building, with 10 grandchildren poised at a unique historical crossroads. For example, watch 17-year-old Kai Madison Trump's performance at the 2024 Republican National Convention, and you'll see the careful cultivation of the next generation in action. And her portrayal of Donald Trump as a doting grandfather sneaking candy to his grandchildren wasn't just charming. It was calculated political theater straight from the dynastic playbook. The divergent paths chosen for these heirs reveal each family branch's distinct vision for the future. Within Don Jr.'s camp, his children, Kai, Donald III, Tristan, Spencer, and Chloe, are being steeped in grassroots political culture. And the Kushner offspring, Arabella, Joseph, and Theodore, inhabit an entirely different world, exemplified by Arabella's 2023 bat mitzvah, which showcased their family's global connections and cosmopolitan outlook. Meanwhile, Eric's children, Luke and Carolina, tread a careful middle ground between visibility and discretion, much like their parents. These contrasting approaches paint a vivid picture of competing strategies within the Trump empire. Don Jr.'s children breathe the air of MAGA rallies and conservative politics, while the Kushner kids navigate international boardrooms and diplomatic circles. It's a deliberate bifurcation that hedges the family's dynastic bets, one branch maintaining the movement's populist core, while another builds bridges to the global elite. Two figures emerge as particularly significant in this generational drama: Kai Madison Trump and Arabella Kushner. They embody radically different possibilities for the Trump legacy. Kai appears groomed to inherit the MAGA mantle directly, her political education focused on mass appeal and populist messaging. Arabella's trajectory suggests a more nuanced approach, combining business acumen with moderate political sensibilities. But currently, most insiders favor Don Jr.'s branch for producing the next outright political star. His children's immersion in campaign culture and base politics gives them a head start in traditional political mechanics. Yet, this generational transition occurs against a backdrop of unprecedented political polarization. Unlike previous political dynasties, these children inherit a name that instantly divides any room they enter. Their public appearances serve as real-time experiments in managing split-second judgments, adoration from one half of America, immediate skepticism from the other. Statistical modeling suggests a 60% probability of at least one Trump grandchild achieving major political office by 2040. But electoral success alone won't be enough. For the Trump grandchildren, the stakes transcend mere family legacy. They're inheriting stewardship of a political movement at its inflection point. Their success or failure in adapting this movement for the future may ultimately reveal more about America's political evolution than their grandfather's presidency itself. And now, we'd love to see you in the comments. Do you expect the Trump children to become, or already are, great heirs? Or do you believe the dynasty is destined to fail in a generation or two? We know this is a hot-button topic, so be sure to play nice down there. And with that said, thanks for joining us for another episode of Old Money Luxury. Cheers, until next time.